Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Community Forum. Come on in. How was your day so far? I hope it was good. Today, I'm joined by our community members, our Patreon YouTube supporters. We got Mike, we got Rodman, we got Hans. Some of these might be familiar faces. These guys are brilliant, and they're always sharing their ideas on this channel, which I super appreciate. And of course, if you're in the comments, please make sure you also take part of this conversation. And our super special guest, the greatest left-hand turn person in the world, okay? Mr. Chuck Cook. Welcome, my friend. How you doing?
Hey, everybody. Great. That was pretty dramatic. Wow. The greatest. I don't know. But okay. Hey, I'll take it. Thank you. Great to be here.
I have a flair for my wife always tells me, she's like, because I try to surround my life with as little drama as possible, but I always try to bring as much flair as humanly possible. She's like, you actually love drama, don't you? I'm like, I kind of do. I like to make things a little bit more dramatic. But welcome in, Chuck. Really, really glad to have you, man. I'm very excited to talk with you. I'm sure everybody here is excited to talk to you as well. Lots to talk about specifically around full self-driving, but we also want to get to know all your different thoughts about multiple things. But like I said before, in the comments section, if you do want to share any thoughts or questions you have as we're talking about it, I'm going to be monitoring the comments. But this is going to be a free-flowing conversation where we're just going to see where the conversation flows. And we'll start with something pretty interesting here. So about 40 minutes ago, Chuck, you shared this tweet on your Twitter. So do you want to kind of give us a little bit of background here, and then we'll start this as a conversational topic here?
Absolutely. It's really quite amazing. Yeah, so I don't live very far from the unprotected left turn that kind of became famous with Elon commenting on it and then subsequently putting it in the release notes for 10.13 that were leaked. It's still not out yet, of course. But since April, I've seen Teslas that were doing things that just you don't do when you're in the neighborhood. Initially, I saw a black Model 3, and then kind of it was a little bit of a gap. But then all of a sudden, a few weeks ago, I started seeing these Model X's stack up. And there's not a whole lot of Model X's in our neighborhood. They're mostly Model 3s and Model Ys. And they were stacking up at the turn. And I'm like, I'll bet they're doing this turn. And I kind of started poking around, and I don't have a lot of insider contact, but I have enough. I'm about 2 degrees of separation away from a lot. And then they started saying, yeah, we're focusing on your turn. I was like, okay, wow. So they're collecting data. And if anybody's ever had a mobile service technician come out, they have some equipment to connect to our cars in certain ways. These ADAS cars, I have learned, have special software on them for data collection. But anyway, 2 days ago, I think 3 days ago, my family, my wife and my son were driving actually just to the grocery store, and they're kind of eagle eye for these too, because I got all eyes out on the road. And this exact car, and I'm hiding the license plate just so nobody's tracking these guys, but was doing the turn. Has a Wawa sticker in the back left corner. That's what that is. Interesting little thing there. Multiple cars have had Wawa stickers, which maybe goes to the connection of the superchargers or something like that. I don't know, but they both. I've seen multiple cars with Wawa stickers. And this car is out here doing the unprotected left, and it goes, and my wife was running an errand, and she texted me back and goes, hey, I got another picture of a driver. And I was in the backyard doing another one of my crazy hobbies, and I just basically booked it over to the turn, because I've been trying to meet these guys and wave and say hi and say thanks for what you're doing. Really appreciate it, and maybe get to know a couple of their names, whatever, and just, hey, take a selfie or something like that. I thought that'd be cool. But so I was out there, standing kind of about half a block away from the turn in an area that I've filmed many times. And then all of a sudden, the black Model X that you see in this picture starts coming around the bend, kind of pauses, and then turns left. So they kind of saw me, I think, and ducked out, and which is unfortunate. But at the same time, I don't know what rules they operate under, and they may have some rules about non-interference or don't interact or stay on the down low. And here I was out there standing on the corner. So maybe I was actually interfering in their work. And if so, and you guys are watching this, I apologize. Don't mean to interfere with your work at all. I want you to get as much data as you can. Yeah, so that's the story. They're out there banging out some testing, obviously, on 10.13. If you look close on this plate, I hid the numbers, but it is a Texas manufacturer tag. Not many Texas manufacturer tags on Model X's here in Northeast Florida, where I live in Jacksonville. So yeah, that's the story.
That's pretty amazing. How does it feel? And actually, before I'm going to ask this question, I want to make this a topic of conversation at some point. So breaking news, what we just heard here is that Herbert Diess is actually leaving Volkswagen. So I just want to throw that
Oh,
out there,
wow.
but we'll make that a topic of discussion here. That's actually pretty good news. But how does it feel to actually be immortalized in a release note? The Chuck Cook left-hand turn, unprotected left. How's that feel?
Well, first of all, some people have said a lot of nice things, and believe it or not, I don't get a lot of hate on Twitter or Reddit or anywhere, which is a little bit unusual, I think, in those environments. I don't get much of that. Maybe I just feed positive energy and ignore the negative, and that's the result. But
Yeah.
I'm proud and humbled, actually, because I've been taking videos now for almost 2 years, and you kind of throw it out there in the ether and you try to improve. And it's a little bit of a hobby of mine, as it probably is yours, as far as I run equipment and technology and
Yeah,
getting it
for
all
sure.
working so the quality is really there. And I've learned a little bit along the way with the CAN bus and putting up a little bit of a HUD data on my overlay. I did an HDMI mod to my own monitor myself with a little bit of help. I had some technical information, but I did the soldering myself. Ended up having to get another one after a while because my soldering points were not so great. 52-year-old eyes. But anyway, so I've invested in it, and so I'm really glad that maybe all of this has paid off a little bit, and we're getting some attention on some things that are hard. And I'm going to just start off with the elephant in the room. I don't think our camera placement is adequate. I don't think the B pillar location is adequate to remove the driver. Now, when I say remove the driver, it's going to be great, like autopilot is on the highway. And I really think it's going to go a long way with the driver in the seat, because they can get away with a lot. And I come from a background with some regulatory experience in the airlines, some things where you really kind of got to work for the FAA, and getting that last mile, I think, is going to be hard because of some use cases that are out there. Now, you can solve it with many mitigations. You can do constrained environments. You can do some other things to actually control where the car can go, but that's not their strategy at the moment. That could change, though. I mean, they're doing constrained environments up in Toronto right now. So who knows? So that's kind of how I feel, humbled, but at the same time proud and glad that the effort is helping Tesla. Hopefully, I hope I haven't created a problem they can't solve and it's public, because that would be bad. That is not my intent. I'm not out there trying to show unsolvable things. I'm just trying to show things that they need to work on.
Right. Okay. Where sorry, go ahead, Hans. Go for it.
Can you explain a little more on the B pillar issue that you're going into? What is it that you're seeing that makes you hesitant that they can really get a good bird's eye view that is consistent with the current camera locations? What types of I guess corner cases are you seeing that are causing issues there? And tell us a little bit more about all that.
It's geometry in my mind. And there's a lot of excuses and arguments to this. You can argue both sides, and I can argue both sides for you if you'd like. But it comes down to, if we're operating in an unconstrained environment, which means the car is going to go anywhere and it's going to use vision, then okay, that's our operational domain. And let's think of some tough spots where you have to be safe. And when there are obstructions in the United States to the left, and it could be a fence, it could be a box truck, it can be a building. Green has filmed some buildings. The B pillar in my Model Y, and I will say the Model X, the Model S, the Model 3, and the other cars, Cybertruck and Semi, will all be different. The B pillar, when I'm sitting in my seat, is behind my head. Okay, so it cannot improve its left-hand view any more than that angle. The forward cam has a 120-degree field of view, so it's got 60 degrees either side of center line, and the repeater cam has a 90-degree field of view, but tilted straight back. It isn't good for looking at left traffic. The B-pillar camera location also has a stated range at its current resolution and implementation of 80 meters. So that range and angle behind my head. I like to tell people, if you want to know what I'm saying, take your own Tesla, slide your seat back where your car is about even with the B-pillar, and then duct tape your head to your headrest and go drive. And just tell me the number of times that you don't even realize it, that when you get to a stop sign when there's obstruction, you lean way forward so you can see to the left. Especially when there is high-speed traffic, like on my unprotected left-hand turn. These cars are coming at 50 to 60 miles an hour. 80 meters of range equates to about 3.5 seconds of distance. Creeping is their current strategy of getting the B-pillar as far out as you can into the traffic, but you get to the point where creeping can only go so far before you're in the traffic. There are some obstructions that you have to get into the road before you can see around the obstruction. That's the physics of it. Now, you can solve this by avoiding it. Go around. If you can't see, find some other way, turn right, do a U-turn. Navigation can solve it that way. Or you can constrain the domain on the maps and say, hey, these spots have natural problems, fences, walls, bricks, things like that we just haven't been able to solve because of the high-speed traffic. If the traffic is going 30 miles an hour, you can do what I call granny mode and just kind of ease out on the road, and nothing's going to happen probably. They're going to see you. They're going to stop. There's plenty of reaction time. Onto my road out here with 50 to 60 mile an hour traffic, you can't get out there. So that's the argument, And the other side, some people would say, and I'm just going to give this argument because it is out there, that the 1970s cars with huge V8 engines in them have much more hood in front of them, and they safely have been allowed to drive in the United States with humans behind them. And I'm like, well, that's a valid point, and that may be the case. I just don't think NHTSA and or the regulators are going to allow that with no driver in the car for some time. Anyway, that's the argument.
Chuck, sorry.
No, please.
So sometimes, are there times of the day where, as a human driver, you'll go to that intersection to make the left turn and there's just too much traffic that it might take too long for you to navigate that you just go the other direction?
Yeah, rush hour, it can be that way. Some people sit there and wait a minute and a half and then realize it isn't going to happen, and then they go right. Yeah, there are times a day it is that dense. Usually around rush hour, around 8:30 to 9:30, and in the afternoons between 2:30 and 5:30.
So have you noticed it ever giving up on making that left turn and then just doing the right and then coming back around, or is that something that doesn't happen?
There was a version. I don't have a photographic memory of versions. It was back in the version 9s, I believe. If you search my YouTube channel, you'll say continuous right loop. There was a time that it never tried the left and it just went into a little loop and it kept bringing itself back to the same spot. So that won't work either. If you're going to bail to the right, then you got to find another solution. Don't bring yourself back around to the same point. Exactly. U-turns need to be solved really to do the planner thing. When you sit at that turn, there's plenty of video out there. You can look at the trajectory vector. I call it trajectory. Some people call it tentacle. Some people call it projected path. And you see it flitter back and forth, back, forth, back, forth. And you can see it planning and figuring it out. So there are times where it goes, no, I'm going right. I haven't figured out if that is intentional or the vision can't see across the median has created what it sees as not a drivable path. There's some argument that there's a little hump in the road and it can't see on their side of it. So it goes right because it doesn't think there's a road to the left. I'm not convinced which of those it is yet.
Interesting. Sorry. Go ahead, Farzad.
No, please. You're good. Do we know what the gap? So the 120-degree forward-looking view camera, and then you have the B-pillar camera. Do we know what the field of view is for that camera? Is it 90 degrees?
It's 90, but it's tilted forward. I'm doing this from memory. If I'm off by a little bit, it is 90, and there are plenty of graphics out there. It's tilted forward, and then the repeater is tilted aft. And
backwards.
They overlap by about 3 or 5 degrees, kind of in this horizontal spot, but not much.
Okay, so that was going to be my question. Is so when we're thinking about the position of where you would have to move your head forward to look left to make the left. Is there overlap between the P-pillar camera and the 120-degree camera? Well, and how big is the gap? Do we know how big that gap is?
So you're getting your geometry wrong now, because now my head is moving forward, which is the fulcrum of that triangle. And if the B-pillar is in back, that overlap doesn't matter unless you're playing with the parallax down the field of view. So no, the B-pillar is, think of it as forward 90, repeater is aft 90. They do overlap in the middle, but the repeater looking aft cannot see the traffic when you're looking left.
I'm talking about the forward view camera. So the 120-degree forward-looking camera and the B-pillar.
To do that, to get to 180 degrees, which would be right off of my beam, and I'll give you 10 degrees forward, you got 120 to 180 or 60. So I would need to turn 50 degrees to get that very left edge of that 120-degree camera to look in that direction.
I gotcha. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Have you thought of what what would be your so say you were at Tesla and you're like, Chuck, fix it, you can fix it, do whatever you want. What would you do? What changes would you make?
Well, it depends on how much money I had. If I had a quick
Infinite.
fix, we got to do a retrofit, a retrofit's in play, things like that. In my mind, the repeater, and first of all, let's go back to our premise. Better than a human, right? Safer than a human, superhuman driving. So that means if I can lean forward to my steering wheel, I would want that camera at least as far forward as I can lean. If I'm allowed to drive in this car on the road, then the steering wheel forward. So you have the side mirror location, you have the repeater location, and then some people would say headlight location to put an additional camera. I personally think the cheapest fix would be to create a repeater camera that could look sideways as well as aft. Now, adding additional cameras on a hardware 3 system may not work because I believe we have 8 ports on the hardware board. So you might have to do time sharing with different angles, and that could get into the neural network training and just not work. And there may be reasons they can't do it. And that's okay. But to me, I continually say that this is going to go a long way, just like it does on the highway with improving in city streets. And everybody that paid for FSD is going to get FSD city streets. When we can pull that driver out to take, the onus of some of these scenarios in an unconstrained operational domain, I can't see it at the moment with some obstructions unless we avoid them with software.
Interesting. Okay. So then if I have the picture of the Model 3 up right now, so we're thinking something like just have a camera right here that would face out, or give you that sort of that side view, right? That would allow you to essentially see what would have been an obstruction in its current form. You'll be, but then you're to your point, you're adding 2 cameras to the neural net, and God knows what that's going to do as far as like, okay, let's figure out how to interpret this new data. Okay.
And video input source capability of the hardware 3 board, I've obviously fixed, right, without an upgrade. And, the processing speed of the chip on that board and things like that are obviously constrained. So that would be the cheap solution. Obviously, the expensive solution is, hey, hardware 4, let's get it right. Let's just, improve the perspective so the visibility to the left is better than a human. Simple as that. And this is such a divisive issue because of the people that love Tesla. And I'm just coming at this from a geometry and a physics and an engineering perspective.
And I super appreciate that. That's
car.
super needed. Super needed.
And this is me driving my car. And I go around and find all sorts of weird things to go, let me see how it handles it. And its current mitigation strategy is creeping. That's all it has to mitigate right now is creeping to get that B pillar to where it can see. And creeping is going to work fine at 30 miles an hour. I haven't seen the processing speed yet make good decisions with good visibility on high speed traffic. And I'll say some of my tests, if you look at my channel, are forward facing unprotected left-hand turns. And that uses the forward camera, highest resolution, and highest range of 250 meters. So cameras are not the issue here. And it has to do the same math of projecting gaps based on high-speed traffic. It does better for sure, but there are still some times, and it's getting better, that you can feel it thinking almost a little bit slower than you. And I do think it's because I can see 1,000 meters, at least to the point I can see a gap is coming. 250 meters is still kind of like 2400 vision, which can be legal to drive with 2400 vision. But so, I think that all of this is going to get solved. The stuff where visibility isn't an issue, as long as they have the frames per second. Elon talked on his call this week that they're getting up to 36 frames per second. That's awesome. Does resolution using vision equal range? And I think the answer to that is yes. At some point, the first time it sees an object is 1 pixel at a certain distance. How much can they tweak those neural networks to where that distance gets as far as a human's? I don't know. And I'll say, I know it can't see, as far as I can, because it'll make the decision to go very close in front of the last car and then it's wide open. So the better decision would be to let one more car go, and then you got all the time in the world to proceed. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking. I'll let you guys.
No, you're good. You're good. Just for those that are not familiar, if you're not familiar with Chuck Cook's channel, just type Chuck Cook in YouTube. He's got a ton of great videos that where he puts his Tesla, which is a Model Y, is it? Or Model 3?
Model Y Performance Stealth. So I've got Gemini wheels, but it's a white Model Y Performance dual motor.
Got it. And as you can see on this video, so I have it up. I should have asked for permission. Is it okay for me to show this video?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
No,
Sorry
totally
about that.
fine.
Yeah. So this is from Chuck Cook's channel. So what's really great about this is that you can see the inside view on the lower right-hand corner where you can see what the screen is seeing. And then on the top and towards the left of the top, you can also see the inside view from the cockpit. But then you obviously have a drone shot on the lower left corner
So
that
actually,
really highlights. Yeah.
let me correct you, Farzad. It's better
Yeah.
than that. So back up a little bit to where I'm at the turn.
Sure.
If you just want to scrub back or go to the next one, and then just kind of pause it where the car stops.
Okay, so
You'll see it kind of come up, and then you'll just see me stop. Okay, well, it went for it. It rolled through that one, so that wasn't a great one. Maybe you can find one in a second. But what I'm going to show you, you're seeing here, lower left-hand corner is pretty clearly a drone shot. With the drone operator at the controls. And for those that are watching, I do have my FAR 107 FAA permit. I went through a little bit of Tesla queue with reporting me to the FAA saying I didn't have the right permits. And I'm a commercial airline pilot. I have a pilot's license, but the monetization of YouTube's was considered a career. So apparently, I needed a special permit, which is effectively a good thing for the FAA. It's training, and I passed the test, and I do have the permit to put these on YouTube now. So it's a drone shot. What you're seeing on the top is a 360-degree camera that I'm rendering at 180 degrees. But the important thing about this is I placed that camera on top of my car abeam the B-pillar. So what that means is what you're seeing is not what I'm seeing as the driver at the steering wheel. You're seeing what the B-pillar camera could possibly see with its location, right? So if you see where that fence is and that angle, that's the angle the B-pillar is looking there on that upper left-hand section of that 180-degree camera. So if you, and then as the car scoots up, you see at 50 miles an hour, there's just no way, you have to kind of, be a little bit further forward. And the car can get far enough forward on this turn. I want to make that very clear. This is not the use case that says B-pillar has to come, because the car can creep far enough to where the B-pillar can see down the road with a very sharp angle. It has to look through some telephone poles, has to look pretty kind of steep angle, so cars start to stack up on top of themselves in the distance and the like. So that 360 cam is rendered there from the B-pillar location. On the lower right is my HDMI export that has the feed directly, and I've synced them up so that it's as real time as I can, down to I think it's 1/60th of a second synchronized. And the cool thing I like to show everybody that doesn't know what it is that little black bar on the top and that white circle on the left of my screen is data I extract from the CAN bus in real time and re-render some parameters that let you see things like the second torque is applied. I got the torque graph on there. I've got the torque being applied. That circle on the left-hand side of the screen is a 3D axis accelerometer reading the forward, lateral, and vertical acceleration. I had some help creating that by Matthew Driver. Give him some shout outs there on Twitter. He really helped me with that 3D rendering there. And then the other meters you can see up there, I can see when autopilot's engaged, and I've just thrown some things up there that were relevant. And then, with all of that, there's a lot of information here to analyze. And I truly think that this is why Tesla has called me out, is there's just a lot here to analyze frame by frame. And I sometimes grab my finger and tilt it so you can see what's being visualized, whether that's an accurate representation of what the car can see or just what they're choosing to show us. I have no idea, but Tesla would. And then, it's perspective from the B-pillar is a little bit of an example here, just so you can kind of see how it has to creep to get somewhat of a view.
Yeah,
anyway, thanks for letting me explain it.
Of course, yeah. No, I think so thank you for saying that, because this kind of helps me. I've just gained a new sort of level of admiration for this video, because so right here, as you can see on the bottom left, the car stopped, and then if you see here that B-pillar view, it's completely obstructed by this fence, right? So this would be a very line. At the stop line, right? So he's at the stop line. You can see the stop signs right here, but as a driver, you would be much closer to the stop sign here from the B-pillar. You can't see anything. Like you have like maybe 10 feet right here, maybe 15, 20 feet of use space. So then the car obviously has to creep and encroach the pedestrian lanes to be able to actually see what the hell is going on, and you can actually see the position of the car there. So that's super helpful to understand. Okay, got it.
There's one point I want to highlight here too. When you see this view and where the car has chosen to stop at the end of its creeping, it is pretty close to the edge of the road. And a lot of folks have said, hey, it can creep just fine. It's not in the lane of traffic. And what I want to just let people know, you tell me your tolerance to put the front fender of your Tesla near traffic. What's your tolerance? And as an example, I just would say, hey, as a pedestrian, and in my video that I described Chuck Cook's complex left turn, I actually go out and film it by hand. I'm like, listen, there's no traffic coming, but I'm going to go stand on that white line that defines the lane. And I get way out there, and I'm like, I would not stand here if there were cars coming. It's too close. Even if I'm not in the lane, it's too close. If you disagree with that, then go out on I-95 or any interstate in your state and stand on the yellow line. Just tell me, that's what you're saying the car should be doing. And I'm like, no, it shouldn't. It needs a buffer, whatever that buffer is, until we're all robotaxi. Maybe it's a foot, maybe it's 3 feet. Everybody has their comfort zone, but on the line is too close. And if the car has to get on the line to see left, we're kind of getting in that buffer zone where my camera argument is kind of like, it just needs to be able to see a little bit better. The headlights would be superhuman. Oh my God, I could see it before I could, which is really what I wished for,
I think what's also interesting about this spot is that it's a good straightaway. And, like this might be a 55 mile per hour zone, but there's no way that people are going 55 miles per hour down that. They're going to hit 65.
Well, just living here over the last 25, 30 years, you can hear some motorcycle drivers in their youth that are flat out using it as a strip. And we're talking hundreds of miles an hour on some narrow cases. It happens on straightaways like this in anyone's hometown, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting spot. And I would just point out, going back to the top camera, that is not the Tesla camera. Like he's getting much more view than you would get out of that B-pillar camera. So whatever you think you're seeing here, it's completely different to the Tesla.
And that's because I don't have access to the B-pillar. And for everyone that knows on their dash cam, the B-pillar is not recorded. Only people that have accessed the MCUs after they've been in a wreck have been able to extract that data. I really wish I had access to the B-pillar. I do have some old videos where I put a GoPro exactly at the B-pillar location and tried to simulate it a little bit. It kind of gives a little bit of what would it be like. This is actually a little higher than the B-pillar also by about a foot, because my Insta360 sticks up about that far and it's suction cupped onto the glass. So it's got elevation advantage too.
Yeah. But in any case, you're never going to get the same exact, like the focal length and like all the lens geometry, like that's all going to be different. So I mean, it's great to have what you have, but like it's important for people to, when they're looking at this, to recognize that what you're seeing here is not what the Tesla is seeing, and it makes a difference. Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say, going back to like when a car is about the size of a pixel, AI it needs a certain amount of data before it can actually recognize like that it's a vehicle. And I mean, it's the same as our eyes. Like something gets too small, it's just not going to recognize it. But you're going to need, like probably at least like a 4 to 5 by 7 like number of pixels that's increasing in size over time before it's going to recognize that it's a car. It's a super hard problem.
I want to highlight a quick comment here real quick. Sorry, by Philip. So Philip says, I want to point out that this turn is not acceptable in the EU, not Sweden at least. Looks like straight up Russian roulette. But I'll tell you, these turns are everywhere in Texas as well. So this isn't just a Florida thing. Like there's so many of these near my house. Sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, and that goes back to the constrained environment question, and and things like that. And believe me, and the weird thing is, I got 2 points to make here, and I'll probably forget the second one by the time I get there. A lot of people say, why don't you just go to the stoplight? And there is a stoplight 1 block to the right. And over the 30 years I've lived here, there have been more accidents at that stoplight due to people running it than at this intersection where people are aware and doing the turn themselves.
Interesting.
So it isn't always safer to go to the light. If you, obviously a Tesla might be able to handle being, run into by a T-bone through run the red, but there's a lot of videos out there showing that it doesn't always work. So, and like I said, I forgot my second point. It's the way my mind works.
So how dangerous do you think it is if the Tesla goes into the lane with 55-mile-an-hour traffic or more? Like if it's slowly, like very, very slowly going into the lane, people, if they're paying attention to the road, they'll see that in advance, and switch lanes or slow down. But like, what are the odds that someone wouldn't see that and actually hit you, do you think?
Well, I guess you count the number of people texting while they're driving, and you could probably derive the risk there. Elon tweeted a while back that they were going to introduce a little bit of reversing kind of logic, that if they do go too far, that they could pull back a little bit, which I was excited to see. There's a whole lot of things to think about with reversing, meaning like, especially with a driver in the car. If it's completely autonomous, the car can do whatever it wants. But when I'm in the car and if it's in reverse and I hit the accelerator, which way does it go? I don't know what the answer to that would be unless it was very clear. And then, of course, you could get stuck if somebody's really tailing you and you're out too far, and now you're in a situation. I've been there before, right? I goosed it, or I've even backed up sometimes when it has gone too far. I just think the risk is not as safe as a human if you're putting yourself in traffic and don't have an option of where to go. So to answer your question.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really interesting here is that there's so many different behaviors that could be done to curtail this situation, but that defeats the purpose of having this system in the first place, in my opinion, because then you're essentially putting on layers that are going to incentivize the driver to take over, because they're like, well, it's going to go down this intersection, it's going to take 5 minutes longer, so I'll just drive myself. And then you are defeating the purpose of having this system, which in the long run is supposed to save lives, right? And but you're incentivizing humans to take over the wheel, so to me, that's where like that sort of thing breaks down when the argument comes up of, well, just go towards another place, or do this instead. It's like, well, no. It's all about carrots and sticks. You can't put a carrot in front of a human driver. You know what I'm saying? You got to give him a stick or give him a carrot to use the full self-driving system.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out here, now that you have the drone shot with the car up, and what Elon actually said in the release notes and in his tweet was it should improve a Chuck Cook style left-hand turn by improving, I think he even called it a pose, of the ego car in the median. So really, all I'm hoping for in 10.13 is not for this turn to be licked, but to use the median as an option to not have to have all left and all right clear, which today it does. Today it waits on a clear left, clear right, I can go all the way. A human driver here waits on the left, goes into the median, but has to go at an angle, and then it waits on the right. And ironically, when it creates that angle, the repeater camera looking to the right now comes into play to be a very good camera to wait on the right side to be clear as it proceeds to the left. So, just for everyone watching, and maybe I'll make a tweet about this at some point so it's clear, I don't expect turn 13 to solve my turn. I'm hoping that the median gets used in a logical way in certain scenarios to where it has an additional tool in its toolbox to attempt this intersection by leveraging the median.
And that would help with a lot of things. Like in Utah, I see tons of roads that have like 2 lanes going one way, 2 lanes going the other way, and then a middle lane, which is a 2-way left turn lane. People use that all the time during heavy traffic, and right now autopilot doesn't use it at all, ever.
Yeah.
Do you think there's going to be? Sorry, Hans, go ahead. Go for it.
I was going to say that'll be an interesting case. I know in most states it's actually illegal to use that middle lane to merge into traffic, although almost everyone does it. And so, how will Tesla handle something like that, where you could technically get a ticket for that, but it's pretty much required in order to be functional?
Sorry, are you talking about that? I call them suicide lanes. I don't know what they're called, where the center lane can be either or.
Yeah.
Yep. We have those all over here in Texas.
Yeah.
Yep, all over Utah.
You're always supposed to use it.
That might be an interesting scenario to throw in. I've tested it before. It does pretty good. It does not wait in that section yet because it doesn't know how to use medians yet, but that could be a good extension of this use case.
Yeah.
Chuck, have you done U-turns?
I've tried to set it up, and usually it's kind of a complete maneuver. Some people have filmed successful U-turns. I have not ever filmed one or had one complete. And it's a really interesting use case when you consider that it has to very accurately understand turning radius and the distance from it where it starts the turn and the far side drivable space red line. So that is another tool it needs if rerouting is its solution. Yeah.
Like going back to your camera criticisms, I think one of the points that I've heard is that FSD is not able to do those 180 or close to that, mainly because the camera setup is not accurate. I can't speak to that, but it does seem like the B pillar and then the repeater cam, that setup is not sufficient to get the video geometry correct or whatever to accurately model like where it needs to go or to see what it needs to see to make those turns. So
your comment reminded me of my second point that I had a second ago, and it's the camera architecture was designed by Mobileye in 2016-ish, and it was designed for autopilot, and we're making it do something that probably wasn't in the roadmap, at least anywhere near on the roadmap for what it needed to do back then. Right. Some of the functionality that we're at least having to address. Maybe it was on the roadmap, but all of these corner cases weren't there. And it does a really good in a desert or a highway where everything around it is within that perspective. So don't blame Tesla that they're making do with a hardware setup that is kind of old and hasn't been changed, with the exception of the addition of the driver monitoring camera on the new S and X. That change is the only change to the camera suite of cars, since 2016.
Yeah, I guess Elon has said that, like, they were confident. I mean, and this was several years ago that their sensor suite was adequate. It's hard to say. I mean,
and just let me go on record saying I'm not on the inside. They may know what they know. They may have proven it in the simulator in a way that I just can't perceive yet. And maybe I'm just feeling its hesitancy as an indication that it can't see. But geometry is geometry, and you can't change that, and being confident is a long way from ruining a driver in my mind and calling it level 5 robotaxi or just robotaxi sake of any human. But I'm behind him. I'm supporting it. And I'm going to get out here and bang it out and test it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that just to contradict you, but I'm just saying that it was a while ago that he did say that. And we may find that there are situations like yours that prove that it's impossible, or the U-turn situation that requires like something additional, or just to increase the margin of safety, right?
Well, and he said that at a time when he thought the problem was simpler than he has found out that it is. And he's stated that publicly, that, he thought they were a lot closer to solving it because he underestimated the full difficulty of the problem. And so, it's not unreasonable to extrapolate and say, hey, there are things that he just couldn't foresee at that time. And maybe he doesn't necessarily have the full confidence today that he had when he made that statement several years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is that on the quarterly call 2 days ago, he has reiterated again that he's confident it's going to get solved this year. So I'm so curious to see how this specific turn plays into that definition of solved, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
I didn't hear level 5 robotaxi, no driver in the seat. I heard we're going to deliver city streets to everyone that's paid for FSD, which means they're going to have a slider in their autopilot button. They're going to accept some risk. They're probably going to have some rules. Basically, elimination of the safety score is what I heard. And I'm okay with that now that we're getting there. Initially I was really, really hesitant to let this go out. And I'll say, I haven't heard of any dangerous accidents. People are being safe and taking it for granted. It is a learning curve, though. Anybody that gets FSD, passes the safety score, just give yourself some time, treat it with kid gloves. I've got a safety video out there that highlights some points that you just might want to consider before you drive it for your first time and possibly hurt somebody or yourself or your car. Because it can do things at the weirdest time. But there are times when you build up confidence and you learn its domain and you know exactly when it's going to screw up and exactly when it's going to be fine. There are those times when you're driving it that you just like, man, it's got this down.
Yeah. Well, and I think for people just to think about the difference between, having a driver who's responsible for the car being FSD wide release, and then the difference between that and robotaxi is like, would you feel comfortable putting your child in the backseat of that car you not driving the car and entrusting that robotaxi then to take your child through that intersection. And, there's a big gap between that. And that's, in order for it to be safer than a human, like that's the type of difference in scenario that you're talking about. Like, it's one thing to be in the car with your kids in the back and knowing that you can take over at any time if you need to prevent something dangerous from occurring versus nope, just go.
Yeah. And to put yourself in that scenario, I'm not asking anyone to put their kids in the car, but put a teddy bear in the, child seat in the back and do my tape or Velcro your head to the headrest experiment. And you make the own choice of when those people's lives are in your hand, you think you can drive as safely as you possibly could. If you think you're just as safe doing that as leaning forward and peeking with your kids in the back, then you and I just disagree. That's all.
Yep.
I see a lot of folks with like their backrest all the way back, like low rider styling. So maybe I'll achieve the same safety score as those guys.
As long as they never lean forward at turns with instructions.
Fair.
Then
They still have the option to lean
are,
forward. Yeah, that's very true. Rodman, I wasn't sure if you were going to say something there. I think you were gearing up. If not, that's okay.
It's okay.
Because actually, I have a question. So, how does this then play into the notion of a Tesla network where you can add your car to a fleet of cars that will allow you to earn money on that car, which to me, correct me if I'm wrong, to me was tied to solving FSD. So then what does that look like within that context? Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I do. And also Elon said FSD is going to get a lot more expensive at the end of this year after it's released. And I have a little bit of a hard time with that because I feel we're squeezing out an entire demographic by making the cost of FSD a larger and larger percentage of the car, especially if we start making $25,000 cars and the price of FSD is now $15,000 or $20,000. You're doubling the price of the car for what you're hoping is just city streets. But if you're trying to be the equivalent of a New York taxi driver with a medallion, that's a different business case. And in my mind, he ought to manage that expense by issuing that app for robotaxi fleets to people paying what would be the equivalent of a medallion to a New York taxi driver. And let city streets be part of the product and the brand. And I've got an argument I like to make on this because I work at an airline. I work at JetBlue. I think everybody knows that. I'm a director there, and I'm also an Airbus captain. But part of our product there is we give away Wi-Fi for free. Come on our plane, Wi-Fi is free, enjoy it. It costs us money to do that, but it's part of our brand. It's part of our product. I kind of wish FSD and all the autonomy was part of their product, even if the price of the car went up and it wasn't this add-on, because as it gets more and more expensive, it's kind of squeezing out. It's kind of like, another airline charging you $20 for internet. At some point, you don't pay for it and you're really missing out. But that's not the way they're going. And, obviously I'm not on their team trying to fund it. There's a whole lot of revenue out there at the price point it's at right now. I just wonder when it will deteriorate.
We're getting a shout out for a great movie selection on JetBlue, by the way. There you go, Chuck.
Just to go back to that, like I think, or back to your point, Farzad, I think there is definitely a gap between, this FSD beta going from beta to wide release and robotaxi. I think that's fairly clear. Not just from a regulatory point, but just from a functionality point, there's it's pretty clear that getting FSD to work for a person is going to be different than getting it to work for, a general use case where you don't need a person in the car. I mean, like even before robotaxi, just getting it to work completely driverless. I think that's a really big question in the community because you can solve FSD with a person in the seat, but getting it to the point where there's no one in the seat, I don't think anyone really has a clear idea of what that needs to be. I mean, what's the difference? What are the parameters or metrics for measuring that this is safe enough that we don't need someone in the seat? And that's something that no one's really asked Tesla about. It's we keep asking about what FSD, when is it coming? But we haven't asked, when is that point? What is your metrics? What is Elon's metrics for eliminating the driver? And
in what domains?
yeah,
Because
exactly.
I think a lot of people have a false equivalency thinking that because FSD with the driver monitoring it is currently created in such a way that it can be used in an unlimited domain, pretty much. Once they get to single stack, that it will be able to use on any street in any city. That I think they lump robotaxi in with that, and that is not necessarily going to be the rollout path for Tesla. It could be that they decide to limit robotaxi operations to geofenced areas the same way that other companies are doing currently. And so, yeah, that's another factor that plays into all of this as well.
Yeah. In Texas, Elon, for the first time that I ever heard him use the word, we're going to create a dedicated robotaxi. That word dedicated was the first time there was never product mentioned that was going to be for robotaxi. So that could have been the first inkling of a fork into hardware that will be capable of all the things we're talking about here. And it will actually be a separate product and available for fleet operators. Maybe that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, my thought was that would be a vehicle that had no steering wheel, no pedals. He's talked about like maybe this was in 2019 or 2020 of like having like something you could do, like you could take your Model 3 or Y to the service center, and they would basically take out the pedals and the steering wheel, I believe, and then it would become like a driverless vehicle. But yeah, to see that step, it's completely unclear.
Yeah, to me too.
I think 10.13 is going to help us see the road a little bit clearer. This is just like a thought process, like sort of thinking out loud here, because really I think it's going to help us see just how close to let's say above a human safety level they can get that specific turn. And I think if they somehow figured out that maybe we're not thinking of, maybe we're missing something, they're like, you know what, yeah, we can do this, we can do it with 8 cameras, you guys, what are you guys talking about? They'll figure it out, kind of thing. Maybe with angling the car, whatever other, maybe they just have black magic and it just predicts, it just knows when there's going to be a car. I have no freaking idea. Gravitational waves, I don't know, but they'll use something, right? And then, I think depending how close they get to that very specific real world scenario where it's super, super difficult for a self-driving car to navigate through with 8 cameras, if they're able to solve that purely, I think that we get a much clearer sense as to what Tesla's long-term full self-driving sort of strategy is. Because then, to me, I think opens up the window that says they will be able to achieve full self-driving with their current suite, which opens up a lot of possibilities with their current lineup. Forget the robotaxi. If it gets to a point where 10.13 is still like like your turn, the Chuck turn is still hairy, and they're just getting to a certain level, but it's not close enough to where you're like, yep, just let this thing drive on its own. Then the window opens to, okay, so we need like a dedicated robotaxi with a brand new hardware suite to really get us to level 5. And then at that point, will they choose to use that technology to retrofit back into the existing fleet, or do they almost go back in a sense on their word that you can add your car to a fleet, because you can't add your car to a fleet unless it's level 5, right? So what do you guys think about that? I don't know if that came out clearly, but I think this next release has a lot of implications to it, but I might be overthinking it.
Well, there's still a potential out where they could have their dedicated network in a geofenced area where they don't have those specific challenges that the limitations of current hardware can't overcome, and that some Tesla users will be able to put their car in that network. And so technically they will be able to, there's still the possibility of something like that occurring.
Yeah. And believe me, going around it is a solution. They just got to continue to work and evolve that. I mean, completely. I don't want to set the bar as you have to be able to do this turn to call it safer than human. Use your other options, figure it out. Obviously there could be an inconvenience point of, in some scenarios, the right turn means you're going an extra mile. If you've ever missed an exit on an interstate, it isn't always a great solution in all scenarios. In my particular one, there's a couple U-turn opportunities. So I don't have as high expectations for 1013 as you just alluded to as being, wow, this is going to define it. I'm just hoping for median usage in an effective way to give it an extra tool to complete the maneuver. And honestly, if it starts bailing out to the right, I'm going to be like, okay, let's see it do the U-turn now. And if it does a U-turn or two in the future, probably not on this release, I'm like, that'll work. I would get in this car. And I'm okay with that.
Got it.
Well, there is a case for Tesla tackling Chuck's turn, because you really want to go after the extreme case, right? If you can handle that extreme case, everything else is gravy, right? Like if you go after the worst cases, like you automatically get all the easier cases. So if you can do this with with a degree of confidence, like that makes everything else solvable. Like this goes to the whole idea of FSD. Like if they can solve left turns, like right turns, going through intersections, all that stuff's easy, right? Like the hardest thing to do is making unprotected left turns. That's like the hardest problem in driving. So that's why they're so focused on your turn, because it is one of the hardest ones that they've seen, or that they have enough data on. And but yeah, going back to the other points, it's still not clear, like if they get, whether it's 10.13 or whatever, it's not clear still. But I think it could be a good barometer of like where the whole project goes. Like if they think they can get this with like 98% confidence, maybe that sets the stage for them getting everything else done and then moving on to like whatever the next steps are for getting to robotaxi. But like if they can't solve these problems, they need to either have a workaround or they need to keep working, right? So
I had one idea, one more tool they could add in their tool chest, which is if it does have to creep out too far, like where it's in the lane, it would then be able to see down the lane and be able to predict, oh, this driver doesn't notice me, I need to reverse quickly, and it'd be able to reverse instantly because it doesn't need to shift like humans have to shift, and we have to like wait a second for it to shift. So that'd be kind of
I'm interested to see that functionality. If they do implement it, there are definitely some corner cases in that specific use case with people behind you, and
exactly.
they could go,
you don't want to give
really badly.
Right.
But if it was a suitable scenario, and maybe it chose to creep out only when there was nobody behind you, okay, that works. So there's a lot of ways that tool could be useful, and if it does use reverse, I need to know it as a safety driver which direction I'm going to go if I hit the accelerator. Or, if it's in drive, yet it's going in reverse, and that would at least tell me if I hit the accelerator, I'm going to take over and go forward. That would be a logical way of implementing it. But you got to think through that one a little bit before you write the code.
Yeah.
And there's like, you don't want to go forward and then like instantly switch back and like destroy the gears or like give person whiplash but like that does seem like a very like a new. It's adding as many problems as it's solving.
Yeah. Well, as a human, I've done it before. So,
right.
If we're going to go back to that benchmark, it's not very often, but I've gone in reverse on occasion when I wasn't where I wanted to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you guys talk about Elon's tweet from 2 years ago? Someone asked him, do you see the need to upgrade cameras to 4K and better HDR in the future? And he said there will always be upgrades.
Yeah, and we've seen leaks on the cameras and hardware for at least I've heard of them. They're definitely bumping up the megapixels a lot. I think I'm not going to quote it because I'll get it wrong, but there were some spec sheets sent around of what was rumored to be the next version of hardware for the cameras, or at least new camera OEM parts. And to me, resolution equals range for vision neural networks, so the more resolution you get, the further out you can see, the earlier you can see, the more time you buy yourself for decision making, latency, jitter, all those things that they have to deal with. That's great if they do.
And one of the neat things about resolution is that they don't have to be bogged down by processing the whole resolution of the whole camera field. It could just pick out like, okay, I need to like super scale this. I need to look at the full resolution of this little spot, where the cars are. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. So then, so do they solve it by end of this year? So I think, and what does that mean within the context? I think we just went through a bunch of different variations of what that means. Yeah, it's very interesting to watch this whole thing unfold. I think what's I made a video a few months ago, it feels like now, where my headline was Tesla has solved FSD and no one knows it yet. And what I used was Elon taking on Twitter, Carpathy going on sabbatical, the fact that they were still having improvements to the software, and I was like, okay, that's enough signals for full self-driving. For me, that means that, hey, whatever they're saying they're going to solve, they're going to solve by the end of this year. But I think the nuance of exactly what does that mean within the context of level 5, I think, is something that I think I need to spend a little bit more time thinking through, because of what the implications are to what your car in the driveway like what it means to the car in your driveway. Like, what does that mean to the car in your driveway? And I think having people like you, Chuck, just be willing to have these like open conversations, and it's not even just like it's not neither negative or positive feedback. It's just factual things that are happening, and really the goal here is to have those conversations so we can better figure out, okay, where are we going? where are we going? Like, right or wrong, just where are we going? It's good to know where we're going, you know.
Another data point to your end of the year, we still don't have parking lots, getting out of the driveway, all of these other sort of things that would be part of a robotaxi, right? You know, it has to be able to get in and out of a parking lot, at least, maybe not your driveway if you initiate it out of the driveway. And those features we hadn't even seen yet. So that's just kind of another hint. There's no way they're going to implement all of that in the next 5.5 months. So I think, like we said earlier, FSD released to everyone that paid for it, having a slider to turn it on, with the exception, keeping it in beta. And how many things in my autopilot screen are still in beta? Most of them, I think, are still labeled beta.
Yeah, so true. There was one viewer said a few days ago, or sorry, weeks ago, I forget when exactly, but one of the points they made was that you wouldn't necessarily need to solve for the parking lot behavior, because if you're acting as a sort of like a robotaxi where it gets you to your roundabout location, the person can just get out of the car and then walk to their destination. What do you think about that, where the parking lot situation doesn't necessarily have to be solved?
Well, I don't know. I guess it's kind of like an airplane needs to take off before it can go somewhere. And, I don't start off at 10,000 feet going somewhere. I actually got to get out of the, get in the air, so does that mean as the owner,
no way.
I got to get it out on the street? I got to get it out on the street and then hit start, and then it goes. And then when it's done going to pick people up, it's going to be sitting in front of my house when it's done. I think they got to get parking lots down. And that may be part of the single stack. Elon alluded to no GPS required behavior soon. And I think that's all part of it, but I just don't think it's going to be solved in 5.5 months, because we hadn't even seen it in one release yet, and just the way these things work. So I think we're going to have city streets, stoplights, turns, all the stuff we're testing right now will be available to anyone that paid for it. And I think that's going to satisfy a lot of people. I really do.
Yeah. I think they've been working on the parking lot thing. I'm not sure if it was Carpathy or what, but there was definitely some videos where they were showing how they were solving that. And it was Carpathy. And then I thought I remembered a release where they had put some of that stuff out there, but maybe I'm mistaken.
There were some rumors of Release Summon being very close a while back. It never popped into a build.
I think what they've been so focused on is getting this left turn thing, the unprotected left turn. If they can solve that, it's sort of the bottleneck, right? Without this, there's nothing else, right? You got to solve this, otherwise the whole thing is just a waste of time.
Well, there's more than just this, but this is the one we're paying attention to right now.
I mean, not just your turn, but left turns, unprotected left turns.
High-speed traffic interaction is probably a better way of describing it, because you can create this in a right turn scenario.
That's true.
You can create it, coming out of a parking lot, high-speed traffic interactions.
And it also speaks to the downrange, if you're moving really fast and you're switching from, like, currently they have the autopilot stack doing all of the above whatever it is, 60 mile an hour type roads.
Highway.
But being able to do that, I think James Downs talked about that he thinks the limitation of the FSD stack on being able to process information, that is it a long enough distance away to where there's a lot of uncertainty in the neural nets, but when you're moving at a high rate of speed, you're overtaking that quickly and having sufficient reaction time. That's another manifestation of the exact same issues.
Yeah. And optimization of the entire algorithm, I don't think anyone's saying it's there. I mean, I think the comment about getting up to 36 frames per second from where they are today, 30 or a little bit below, is a good example of there's a lot of tweaks to make. Watch them build Starship. Oh my gosh, Starship 24 in the last version going up, it's just where they are now. So if this algorithm is good enough, it can get tighter. The neural networks will take over. It could get more efficient, which would lower some latencies and maybe make better decisions. So we just got to be patient and give it time too, to let them tweak what they're there. I'll also say, robotaxi being done would also sort of imply they stop changing the neural network stack, and we're nowhere near that yet. They still got a lot of functions to build in and train and work on. So done is a probably the wrong word to use, because it's probably never going to be done.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, then from a regulatory standpoint, I don't see NHTSA wanting to certify something being able to be licensed to operate as a robotaxi network without having a stable release that hasn't been changed for quite a while.
So now you're in my other world there. So regulatory approval of certified hardware in order to do X. And in the FAA world, Part 121, customer operations on an aircraft that is certified is that exact thing you're just talking about. I can't change anything on that airplane. I can't add a radio. I can't add a SATCOM system. I can't even add a bracket for my pilot's iPad without getting it certified. That certification is an entire change management system that is a partnership with the regulator. And then you both go through this process, and any changes get added to your what we call an aviation operations certificate. And that certificate is then been approved, and then you're allowed to go out and do it. So there's a process that has been defined in regulatory agencies to do this, but the stable version that's released to do a certain thing is static.
So the only difference here is that there is SpaceX and NASA, like that model. Definitely Elon has shown that he's capable of handling, these two moving parts. He has Tesla, he has SpaceX, he has NASA.
Human rated NASA is much, much different than non-human rated NASA.
Yeah, and Starship is operating underneath prototype licenses. I'm almost confident of. They've got a certain realm they're allowed to operate in, and they're by no means. I think even Falcon 9 sending up an unmanned cargo Dragon mission, it's a certified device. They're not iterating it without approval from the regulators that approve it.
You don't think so? I would imagine that there is some sort of, if they can take the test or whatever that is and automate that test, then as long as it meets all those pieces on the test, then it can self-certify, because that's what they do with Tesla, right? Instead of
that's what Boeing tried to do with some things with the Max 10 too, right. And that self-certification got them in a lot of trouble.
It's not Elon.
Okay, all right. I see the point you're trying to make, and from my experience, with my careers, that isn't how you get to a regulated certified device. If Elon can change those rules, hey, we're going to iterate a lot faster. But when human lives are involved, and there's a regulatory authority that is in charge of that country or that space, usually you don't get to do what you want.
In the car space, this is called homologation, right? So usually you homologate, and then your car the production stays static. But that's not how Tesla works, right? So Tesla homologates each individual car, like as it's being built. So each car is individually being certified by Tesla.
You have a point that I'll acknowledge in saying that the introduction of the feature that came out with seatbelt tensioning is a modification, right? What it took to get them to approve putting that out, I don't know that process. If it was just them pushing it out, wow, you might be right. Maybe this is a new world.
Literally, I could be wrong, but at least based on what I've understood, is that Tesla is individually certifying every car to NHTSA, and it just seems to me this is basically the old approach of like software like the new approach of software versus the old approach of software, and like you want to create a test that certifies everything, and as long as you pass that test, like you can have individual unique copies of whatever. And the rockets are like that to me. I mean, I don't see how Tesla adapts and solves problems and homologates quick or certifies quickly to NASA without doing that, because just the speed of iteration is too.
I wonder if they're doing like internally, they're doing that where they're just like doing their own tests, and then once they have something, they're ready to, you know, sometimes they submit it to NASA and they do the slow testing of it.
It's a great conversation.
It comes down to having an automated version, automated methodology for testing whatever you want it is to test, and then getting all those things into a like a suite of tests that you can perform on any individual object and just get it really rapidly done, so that the cost of change is very low. And that's the very opposite. I mean, this is one of the fundamental things that separates old software from new, and Tesla from all the other companies, is that the cost of change has been reduced to absolute bare minimum. And when you do that, you can just iterate, and just run circles around your competition.
Well, I definitely wouldn't ever encourage them to emulate the airline industry. That's for sure.
Right. And I mean, because they've solved this problem with SpaceX and NASA, it leads me to believe that they can solve the same problem with.
I still think that's an open question. That, you know, they have done it with Tesla. Have they done that with NASA? I don't know. I mean, they don't have that many crew-rated Dragon capsules in service, and there's not a forcing function with the current Falcon 9 architecture that says you need to drive your cost of change on the Dragon 9 or the Dragon capsule that low, because they're not, you know, I highly doubt that they're making hardly any modifications to human rated Dragon capsules currently. Now they're going to have to solve that problem with Starship eventually if they want to continue to operate on the human rated Starship, but they may not. They may do all their iterations in a non-human rated vehicle and then certify human rated and then leave that alone. So those are open questions.
And I would still even think that NASA or FAA does have some requirements for launching Falcon 9s. Like, they're not going to let them change these things willy-nilly without having like some kind of certification that this vehicle is going to perform to a certain standard. So even human or not, like, I mean, rockets are almost sort of the same thing, right? Like, you have a vehicle, it's automated. You have a vehicle that's a Tesla, it's automated, and you have some kind of certification of this rocket without passengers. They're going to have to certify the vehicles without passengers and with passengers. And I think maybe the step is certify the vehicle as a robotaxi without passengers first, and then certify it with passengers or something like that. I don't know.
I think you're on track with having the data to iterate faster than most other industries are able to demonstrate safety, right? So the data set they have to give to whoever is regulating, I think, is the important part there. And one clue that rockets do have time, you know, the length of time from, I don't know, like the fuel leak explosion that happened during fueling on that one rocket, you know, the amount of time from when that incident happened, the investigation to where that was fixed and allowed to happen again, was that amount of time. And that amount of time is they're doing what I think you and I are talking about.
Right.
There was one comment. Sorry, go ahead, Ronan.
No,
please.
I was just saying, that's just
because I want to change topics.
They're squeezing down the time of investigating those problems and just kind of eliminating bottlenecks. But
I am really curious to see how this is going to look like in a world where Tesla has a legitimate full self-driving, like level 5 fully automated vehicle. I think it's in their best interest to have very, very good relationships with lawmakers and regulators now, so that when they get to that point, they're able to fully leverage that relationship to go as fast as humanly possible with the iterations or whatever changes they want to make. You know, because that's so much part of the DNA of the company, you know, having been there. Like, it's like, if you're not constantly changing, people lose their minds. Like, there's literally, you have anxiety that says, I'm going to get fired if something that's going to change tomorrow. You know, it's like, it's such part of it. So I'm blowing it out of proportion a little bit, but I think the point stands. Real quick, there was a very interesting comment around Tesla needing to do a lot more with audio analysis. Humans drive with using eyes and ears. And then there was a comment from Donald, who's a regular viewer of the show. Shout out to Donald. Thank you very much. This is an awesome point. Maybe that will help with Chuck Cook's left turn. Have you thought about that at all, Chuck, where introducing audio could help?
And I think we got Elon to tweet about it a while back. And he did say it will be able to use, you know, a speaker as a mic, and, you know, and a mic as a speaker in some realms, if the software knows how to listen to it, that it would be able to hear. And I think the conversation came up around emergency vehicles. And when I'm sitting in traffic, you know, that siren going off is my first clue of needing to take an action, get out of the way, or perhaps, you know, do what the law requires, pull over. It came up around that time when the whole emergency vehicle thing kind of popped up with regular autopilot on the highway. And we started asking the questions about, you know, can it hear? That's another audio sense that a human uses. And I think, you know, horns from another driver, you know, New York, it's different than where I live in Florida. You know, the amount of horns going off is different. So what it means could have to be translated. But for specifically sirens and emergency vehicles, I think it's pretty straightforward to at least start looking for something and let the neural networks at least start to focus or prioritize or use permanence to kind of go, oh, wait a minute, that's what that is, because we hear this, and connect the two together to create an action.
Got it. Anybody else, any thoughts on that, on using sound? Leveraging sound a little bit more?
Yeah, from a theoretical standpoint, you know, using Doppler, you could even get a sense of maybe some location and speed. But just also understanding how much noise you would have, like literal audio noise, you'd have to sift through to find that and get any sort of accurate sense. That'd be an incredibly difficult technical challenge to overcome. So, I mean, there's definitely some theoretical things that are possible there.
Yeah, you could probably feed that information to a neural net and at least maybe, like you said, like take the Doppler effect and have it just analyze Doppler effects and try to identify. It's almost like when you're looking at something visually, identifying a vehicle, but like identifying a single object over time. I think a neural net could do that. I just never seen anyone attempt that as research. That's not to say it hasn't been done, but most I would say 90% of like a lot of AI right now is in the visual field or the text processing field, like audio. There's stuff being done, but it's still sort of not.
Trains are another pretty straightforward one too. Trains broadcast themselves pretty well.
Yeah, right. You could hypothetically, you know, there is a scenario where using audio, the neural net could be able to tell whether or not it was safe to do a creeping maneuver. That if it doesn't hear, like if it can project that there is, you know, there's no noise coming from that direction right now, that potentially I can get out here into this road. So that's one possibility, but an incredible challenge.
Yeah. You know, we getting rid of radar and combining them with vision was already sort of the first clue that it's difficult to make two different sensors, you know, work together to give you, you know, because then you get in the battle of which one is right. Elon's gone on record with that one pretty quick. And I am of the opinion, and Elon even tweeted, nothing matters but high def radar. I'm of the opinion they're bringing back high def radar. Don't know how, where, maybe it's a dedicated thing or maybe it's AP4. I don't know. I'm hopeful for that. There are some things that radar does better than a human. Sandy would tell you, you know, don't waste your time on radar, you know, go to infrared, near infrared, and that spectrum is better than regular vision. And you can make a very good case for that. So there's other sensors out there. I'm not going to promote LiDAR. I think LiDAR truly was a crutch for a time frame that vision neural networks weren't capable to do what they're starting to be able to do. But yeah, I'm all pro radar with high def, and perhaps even infrared. I'd love to see some more thought experiments on that.
One of the limitations of lidar that really is relevant to the discussion that we've been having is, when they're super expensive and you can only afford to really have one of them on your vehicle, and you mount it right in the center of the vehicle so that it has the best all-around view, you run into the exact B-pillar viewing angle issues that we're talking about here as well. That if you do have an obstruction, like you're coming across, you're passing a truck or something, that
the same problem.
It really doesn't have the vantage point that you would have lean forward in your front seat.
Yeah,
it's very
good
true.
point about only one sensor. The cost of them is going down. I know China is using them pretty extensively. So, Elon gave them a shout out in China, going, they're working hard. They're the ones to watch. So, if their sensor fusion is better than Tesla's in the long run, then maybe there's another way of doing it. I don't think that's the case at all right now, but they're working hard on it.
Chuck, you're still good for another 15, 30 minutes. I want to be respectful of your time. I know we've had you for a little while already.
I cleared
awesome.
my calendar.
I appreciate you.
This afternoon for this. Yeah.
Thanks, man. How much of being a pilot? So you've been a pilot, it seems like for how many years now? You've been flying planes?
Well, after I graduated from Annapolis, I went to flight school. So since I was 22, I've been in training or finished, and I'm 52 now. So in 30 years.
30 years. How much do you think that career has given you a tool set and sort of things to look for to become such a in-depth FSD tester? Because I feel like you bring a lot of technical and sort of like different viewpoints on how to analyze behavior. How much of that experience has given you that tool set?
Oh, a lot. Both being an engineer helps me think like this a little bit too. Most people think I'm, a little bit crazy that way. But and the point about being a pilot, obviously, we're trained in certain ways, at least in modern aircraft. The planes I flew off aircraft carriers in the first half of my career were not very automated. They were what you call stick and rudder kind of things. I flew jets off of East Coast carriers. But modern aircraft, so the 737 or the Airbus I fly now, or any even new jet, has so much automation in it. We have to train our pilots how to handle automation failures. And we have some pretty basic tenets of there's typically 3 levels of automation. The lowest level of automation is you're flying. You're the one in the control of the lateral path, the vertical path, and with your throttle, the speed. And obviously, you're climbing too. So that's, automation level 0. You go up 1 level, that level of automation would be you're giving a little bit of it away. So let's compare this to auto steer. Okay, it's got lane management. It's doing this part, but and you can also manage speed that way too. That would be like what you would call altitude hold, maybe, or just navigating a path like a flight path. And then full automation in an airplane is both vertical, lateral, and speed management, which is typically what pilots are in cruise altitude when you're hearing me turn the seatbelt sign off, things like that. The autopilot is managing both the lateral path, it's maintaining altitude, and it's managing speed. And that level of automation is what I'd call full self-driving. It's following a path I've got programmed, it's managing the directional control, and it's managing the speed to stop and go when it needs to. But as soon as something happens, let's say we hit turbulence, or let's say we have a engine malfunction, or something less severe like our GPS goes out, something like that. So one of the sensors that we need is now having a problem just enough, and the first thing we do is lower the level of automation. Fly the aircraft is the very first rule. Then figure out what's going on. Aviate, navigate, communicate. We taught that from day one. Aviate, fly the plane. Navigate, make sure you're going where you need to go. Communicate, talk to who you need to talk to manage the situation. So same thing in full self-driving. Something doesn't go wrong, lower the level of automation. We can go from full navigate to auto steer. We can go from auto steer to all the way disengage. And lowering that level of automation as things go wrong, and then increasing that level of automation as things go right is just a tenet I've been doing for 30 years. And then you get into symbology and what things mean. On our navigation displays, they're all glass displays these days. There's like a whole bunch of screens. We have iPads over here on the left. The colors mean something. Magenta on an Airbus is something that's being automatically flown. There's constraints. If I'm going to cross an altitude at a certain height, it's a different color. So when I look at something, I know what it's telling me. When I look at the full self-driving screen, I look at that projected path. I look at the drivable space lane. Look at the colors, the cones, where it places things. And I'm thinking a little bit like, these colors mean something. They're not just pretty representations, but they're telling me what the plane or the car thinks of its environment and what it's going to do next. So especially that projected path and the light blue or dark blue based on the acceleration it's going to give. So when I use a car like this, I also try to articulate in ways that go back to these tenets and say, listen, this is kind of what I see is going on. This is how I would handle it. And oh, by the way, it's not just driving itself magically. It's going through a whole lot of work to figure out where it needs to be in the world. And I come at it from what's not working right now? Why is it doing that? It shouldn't be doing that. If I feel my plane shaking a little bit, okay, could be turbulence. My engine could be vibrating because of a fan blade. I could have my landing gear down for some reason that I didn't know. That doesn't happen, but that would be something you would double check, is to make sure your landing gear was up. Maybe you left your flaps down too much, or maybe your flaps leak. There's a zillion things that vibration would tell me to look for. I kind of do the same thing. When my unprotected left does something a little bit different, I'm kind of like, what was different that time? Why did it do that? Anyway, so that's kind of piloting and automation here and kind of where I come from.
Yeah, it's super insightful. I mean, just having that model of being able to just go from full automation down to the stack to human, like it's really hard to imagine like FSD without those different levels, because like even with planes, which are in a very controlled by the airspace and everything's very controlled, right? And you still need to have that level of degradation and automation, right? And it's really hard to imagine that robotaxi or any full self-driving happens without that level. And it'll be really interesting to see over like the next 2 years, like how we ascend that stack.
Have you ever sat up in row one and right about 1,000 feet, you hear the landing gear come down, and all of a sudden you hear bleep, 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 bleep come from the flight deck? Anybody ever heard that?
Yeah, I have. Okay,
so that's the pilot turning off the autopilot. That's the exact same thing as the red jazz hands in the Tesla going, whoa! It's like, it's like, I don't know, you've got it. It's basically what that means. And that alert to the flight pilots means I'm not flying anymore, you're flying. Same thing with some of the indications we get in the Tesla.
Interesting.
I used to be such a nervous flyer back in the day because it's like I just I'm just anxious by design. But then the more, what's interesting, the more I got exposed to full self-driving and like the verbiage around autopilot and how Elon always like put it within the context of, well, it's like plane. Then I started like watching all these like YouTube videos of all these pilots going through their process. I'm like, dude, there's like some similarities here that I never really made a connection with, where like in a world of automation, especially if you're still responsible for the machine, there's so many like little intricacies that you have to be like, a lot of people I think maybe don't think about, but are really important in ensuring that the system, when it doesn't behave the way it's supposed to, that you're always there ready to take over. It's like, and there's so many different points where that can happen. It was just fascinating. And then then like, holy crap, these people are constantly checking stuff. Like I had this one irrational fears, like what if the pilot forgets to put the landing gear down? Oh my God, what's gonna happen? But the plane is not gonna let you do that. It's just not gonna let you. There's gonna be
modern
things in there,
won't. Smaller
modern
general
aircraft.
aviation aircraft would, yes, but
Right.
there are alerts across. I like to make
Right.
a lot of people ask me, because I do this Tesla stuff and fly also, like, well, when do you think we're gonna have pilotless planes? When am I gonna, when's that gonna go full autonomous? And I like to explain that that's a social acceptance problem. And I think that I usually say, as soon as we can figure out Tesla autonomous driving and pretty much anyone's willing to get into a car without a driver, people are going to start to go, well, okay, I guess I can get in that plane, because people do have the fear you just talked about, that is different than getting in a car. Some people are just afraid of flying. And the other point is, one of our modern Airbuses, holds about 165 people. And if that's full autonomous, I got to find 165 people per flight that are willing to get in an autonomous plane and take that for a ride. But there's modern aviation. Let's use Joby as an example. One of our partners that JetBlue were invested with is being built out in Silicon Valley, electric VTOL. And that's only going to hold like a handful of people. And that could be autonomous and only have to find 5 or 6 people that are willing to get an autonomous car. The ride's a lot shorter, the risk is a lot lower, certification's a lot easier, and then we're going to get into that. And then somebody's going to say, I took one of those Joby planes and there wasn't a pilot in it. They still have pilots in them now. I'm just predicting the future. And that, and then the day will come. I think FedEx and UPS and the cargo carriers will probably be the first to be fully autonomous. Amazon's already doing that with delivery drones in some specific areas, and we're doing things like that. So that's my vision into autonomous aviation. I think you're just going to have to solve what we're doing right now first.
But what's interesting is you said it's an acceptance problem. Does that imply that autonomous planes could exist tomorrow if we really wanted them to exist? Do you think it's solved, or we still? Yeah.
Yes. So I
Okay.
just to give you an example of how automated an Airbus. I have to take off. We don't have automated takeoffs yet on a modern Airbus plane. But once I'm airborne and engage it, if I do a full Category 3 landing, it will completely land itself if I set it up appropriately. But that could be done automatically in 0-0 weather and come to a complete stop. Now today I have to taxi that back to the gate manually, but that taxi back to the gate is an easier problem to solve than landing the plane in full, bad weather. Taking the plane off, solvable. But the risks of takeoffs and losing an engine are so dynamic, they haven't automated that part yet. But technically, because skies, what we say, the big sky theory, well, what are the chances you're going to run into something smaller than on the roads? But there are mid-air collisions occasionally, but they're very, very rare. So I think technically, we're doing it with military drones today. It's technically possible, sure.
Well, so when you said 0-0 weather, is that perfect weather or terrible weather? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. 0-0 is zero visibility, landing in pure fog. Like you can't see the hand in front of your face kind of weather.
And it's automated, and it can automatically land that plane in that condition.
And actually, when the weather goes below a certain level, I have to land automated. They won't.
Whoa!
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's called a Category
Holy
3
shit.
approach. It is a full automated landing. It gives the airline additional opportunity to land an airplane in very bad weather. And when it goes below a certain level, I have to use this configuration. And if it's not working, I have to go somewhere else. I can't land myself manually in those situations.
The model to think about is, again, going to rocketry. Like, can you imagine someone hand piloting a Falcon 9 to the ground? It's just never going to happen. Humans don't have the speed of computation to make all those adjustments and the reaction speed.
You teased open the subject there with centimeter level precision.
Yeah.
And GPS is not that precise.
Right.
But SpaceX and many other operators with augmentation of GPS and internal inertial systems have perfected centimeter level navigation, which is required to land on that drone ship. And I know a few folks that worked on that. They used to be with me in the Navy years ago. And that level of precision, if we put it in our cars, could be really, really interesting. When you start to say, wait a minute, and you could argue you don't need centimeter level precision in a car, but I'm like, well, there are times my GPS gets lost, so maybe I do. But the thing is you don't have global centimeter precision. It takes augmentation of satellite signals to get it, and you can't deploy that everywhere. So anyway.
Yeah, I've had this situation. Sorry, go ahead, Hans. Go for it.
I have a nerdy technical question there. Do you know if their solution to that geolocation problem, are they relying on vision, or is it all just satellites and other? How are they getting
SpaceX?
that
How do they land on the drone?
Yeah, SpaceX specifically.
They are. I don't think they're using vision. If they put cameras on it, I don't think it's part of this navigation system. I'm fairly certain, and without being an expert on that team, that they're using what would be called either SBAS, WAS, or wide area augmentation, which takes satellite signals, and then there would be satellite signals, the same signals broadcast from the ship, and together both of those create such a high level of precision, it creates centimeter level accuracy. The Navy does it on aircraft carriers with a spin radar that actually uses radar with very, very high frequency to use some of that precision. I don't think SpaceX is using radar on its drone ships. I'm pretty sure it's probably using satellite augmentation. I could be completely wrong, and there may be somebody listening that's going, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
It's true. None of us do.
And you said it'd be interesting to have centimeter level precision in cars. What would that enable?
Well, it would open the opportunity that high def maps has an opportunity in certain use cases. So obviously, if some operational domains did want to go down the high def map route, like Waymo or some of the others that are pursuing that centimeter level precision, once those maps are developed, can almost let you, navigate a planner without any vision in those areas that are mapped. Now, granted, vision solves the problem of things change since you last mapped it and all those sort of things, but And that may not have been the best argument, but there are times with today's GPS, I've seen my Chevron or my car, like out in the woods where I'm here on the road, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe this level of GPS precision isn't good enough for the planner, so we need something more. So what is that more, so that we don't lose position for our planner with what we've got today?
Yeah, the thing I'm thinking about is like if you look at the pictures of Tesla loading 30,000 vehicles onto a ship, and there's that parking lot where like every like inch is important, right? If you can get that kind of accuracy, and you can pack those cars really close together without like any car getting a scratch on it. So there's definitely applications, but you could also, you can imagine situations where if vehicles can talk to each other with that kind of accuracy, you could get vehicles traveling at speed with far smaller tolerances between the vehicles. There's tons of things.
So in aviation, that's called ADS, automatic dependent broadcast surveillance. And we transmit our position very, very rapidly. If two aircraft are both broadcasting, software can maintain distance. We have that technology in place today. It's not broadly used, but it is out there. There was a mandate in 2020 where every aircraft in the United States had to at least be telling the world where it was every second, basically, and you're broadcasting your position. That's a lot of the data you see in FlightAware and these apps you put on your phone. A lot of that data is coming down off of the aircraft itself. And ultimately, this eliminates the need for radar because the aircraft are self-reporting. But in that world you just described, where cars are talking together, and military aircraft do this also. In fighter aircraft, the lead aircraft's radar is broadcast to everybody else, so he could actually be over the horizon and everybody else gets the benefit of what he sees. That kind of car-to-car communication changes the world. Potholes, traffic, all these other sort of things. If we're all self-communicating, it really, really would be great.
Yeah. Imagine the car in front of you sees a deer that's starting to creep out of the woods, and then like 2 seconds behind.
Or just pileups, right? Like one of the biggest problems with a pileup is that there's a latency between. Was that me? There's a latency between the vehicle, between someone stopping and then the next person stopping and the next person stopping. But like if you have that instantaneous communication, you just reduce like that delay.
Yeah,
I totally see that in the future, and I believe some cars are already communicating with some standard that's been created for traffic signals and things like that. I'm not up to it, but I know there is some traffic signal to car type of communication protocols that are being developed, and I don't know which cars use it. I know the Tesla doesn't, but then you get to that next level where cars are communicating with each other, and then you basically your own mesh network at that point. Right. The more cars you get.
There's a Monroe episode that just released, I think it was yesterday or the day before, where he interviewed this team at University of Michigan. They have something called Empath, I think, or M-City. Yeah. And that's exactly, they're talking about these kind of ideas of like having cameras at the intersections, broadcasting information to the vehicles. I mean, I thought about this stuff like 20 years ago, and it's never materialized. But I mean, it's not to say that it couldn't happen. But
well, you need a standard, and somebody has to develop a standard, and then it has to be sort of certified so the standard doesn't change. So there's no risk in developing your own.
Yeah.
And so in that way, you could see around corners, and there wouldn't be any surprises ever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Their position is basically, level 5 autonomy in cities is not possible without smart infrastructure. And so instead of instrumenting every car with every sensor they would possibly need, you have a network that is on the physical roadway that then transmits all the information that the cars need in order to operate.
Right. And this would solve Chuck's turn, right? Like if the vehicle's coming at you, know that you're there, they can respond and open up a doorway for you to enter safely, right? And there's so much more safety once we have like sort of like a hive mind control, like of vehicles all operating together, instead of, basically we have individuals all operating out of our own self-interest, right? Instead of working together collaboratively. So
in aviation, we call this mixed equipage. if somebody has more equipment than the next guy, typically the air traffic controller has to default to the lowest level of equipage when they run the airspace. That same sort of penalty exists, much like that point I made earlier about how close would you let your car go to the white line. If they were all robotaxis, you'd go all the way up to the line because you trusted that nobody was going to come over and hit you. But in a mixed equipage world, you kind of got to have these buffers for humans that don't have the tolerances that computers would.
Yep.
In Japan, they have like a lot of really tight roads with buildings right up to the edge of the road, and so they put mirrors on some of the intersections. That's kind of interesting.
I've actually wondered if Tesla could leverage a mirror, and that's a fun use case to play with, because I can say, well, clearly I can see it in the mirror, but the Tesla's not going to see it. There are interesting use cases where people go, well, the Tesla needs to know how to use the mirrors because a human does. And imagine the AI team. An Oshkosh team trying to figure out how to develop that CNN network.
AGI, maybe that's the AGI solution. They've talked about AGI. Maybe that's when they start leveraging mirrors. That'd be
when we get real world AGI. Yeah, I mean it's going to start teaching itself, which is what we got to, people are scared about.
Yeah.
Are you saying using the mirrors? Are you like using the rear view mirror?
No, like
mirrors in the environment.
Spatial mirrors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You ever seen one
in the same way? Yeah,
like on a driveway or something like that, where the mirror helps you see,
right,
whether everybody's coming around a bend, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah. What if we start seeing mirrors show up in your turn, Chuck? We know that's where Tesla's going.
That'd be awesome.
They have a whole mirror team out there equipping every freaking intersection with mirrors. There was a quick question here from the comments related to your, we were talking about self-piloting or automated landings. Donald asked, how does the plane see the runway under 00? Are there different kinds of emitters on the ground and receivers on the plane?
Yeah, so it's done with what we call instrument landing system approaches, ILS, and the runways that are equipped for 00 landings are broadcasting both a vertical and lateral beam out there 24/7. Whenever they're on, they're broadcasting a beam that essentially creates a vertical lobe and a horizontal lobe. And the plane flying in that environment knows where it is in that, upper left, upper right, lower, and it tries to find its way in. So the autopilot is essentially flying down the crosshairs of two projected beams of radio energy down to a landing point on the runway.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then once it reaches the runway, I'm assuming it uses radar or something to just estimate its position against the ground?
Yep. So that's where the radar altimeter comes on, which if you've been listening to the 5G controversy in aviation, those radar altimeters use a frequency spectrum that is adjacent to the newly chartered 5G spectrum that AT&T and Verizon are turning on. Those radar altimeters are adjacent, and many of the penalties we've taken since we've turned on that 5G bandwidth is limiting our low visibility landings on some aircraft that do not tolerate 5G interference very well. So that radar altimeter very precisely can see the ground down to inches, but it only turns on at certain altitudes, so it's only good for very, very low flight.
Got it. So putting your phone on airplane mode is actually legit on some planes, it sounds like.
So believe it or not, one of the things in 2013 I was on the committee that allowed you to do that. It was called the Personal Electronic Devices Aviation Rulemaking Committee, and I was one of the pilots they put on that list, and we worked on the rules and the regulations that change that rule that we all get to benefit from today. So airplane mode, believe it or not, is a high-level abstraction from what you really need to do in a plane, because airplane mode, depending on how you have it configured in the phone, turns both Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the cellular radio off. The cellular radio is the radio that they were worried about. But the weird thing is cellular radios don't have to be off in flight because of interference. It's because of the rules of the FCC worried about overwhelming cellular towers below you with a very rapidly moving device across multiple nodes. So in the Personal Electronic Devices Rulemaking Committee, what we effectively did was validate tolerance if everybody had their phones on in the specific aircraft you're in, the metal tube, the dimensions, the number of windows and doors it has. And we said, if all of this is on to the certified limits of all of these bands that these radios have, does it affect the systems? And we deemed that there was enough safety margin that if anything did happen, the pilot would have ample indication or warning that something was awry. And then we did some training for the pilots and all that on. That was a long answer to your airplane mode, but
No, I appreciate
have a
that.
personal history with that one.
Got it. Thank you for making that happen for us, by the way.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Appreciate your help there. So maybe the last topic here, and then maybe this a little bit off topic from the FSD conversation, but very related to Tesla. This is sort of I want to pick your brain on here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were in the Navy for a number of years. Is that correct, Chuck? How many years was that?
Yep, 13 active and 12 in the reserve, total of 25.
Awesome. Thank you for your service, by the way. Really appreciate that. So one of the things that I'd noticed while I was at Tesla was that there were a lot of veterans working at the company, a lot of ex-military. And one of the things that was very eye-opening for me from a culture perspective was that Tesla relies really heavily on a mission-driven sort of culture where everybody feels like they're part of something greater than themselves. And I think that's one of the key reasons why it's able to achieve so many great things. It's because a lot of people are on the same page and they understand that, hey, we're working towards something greater than ourselves. We're working towards advancing sustainability in the world, and we're doing so with amazing products. And the way the company was built is that it was built around a lot of empowering of people and listening to everyone's feedback. And one of the things I kept hearing from some of my colleagues that were previously in the military was that it reminded them a lot of the military. It reminded them a lot of the sort of culture they experienced in the armed forces. Could you talk at all about mission-driven sort of culture of empowerment? As much as you can share, I would love to hear. Maybe we can have a conversation on it, because I think there's something there, and there's a reason why Tesla hires so many folks that used to be in the military. I'd love to learn more about that.
Well, that's first of all, thank you for asking. And
Sure.
Also to anyone listening that has served both in first responder or military status, thank you for your service. Service to both country, self, and your family, I think is an important part that we can't underestimate. And also, if there's any young people out there, I would also highly encourage you to find your way of serving in your own way. It helps you mature. It helps you break out of your localized shell that you probably grew up in, like I did. And I'll never forget the day I showed up at the Naval Academy and I was like, holy smokes, I was living in a microcosm and all these people, and I had classmates from Ghana and Senegal and different parts of the country. My roommate was from Montana, and believe me, Florida and Montana are basically two different countries when you talk about the people. And I had to learn about that. And then I kind of came to realize, my family grew me up a certain way and everybody doesn't grow up that way. And you mix all that in there. So my point is service does change you. And I say that because your world gets bigger. And then to the point of having a greater mission, in any level of training for the military specifically, and most first responder type roles, you have a mission. The police force is to uphold the law. The fire department is to keep people safe. And the military is, defend a country and the principles it was founded upon when called upon. And ultimately, that is your goal. But in each of these organizations, there's also a chain of command and a very specific hierarchical structure that really has no deviation. And there are consequences for not doing what is expected. And those consequences usually are bad. So you kind of grow up in this environment, and the military is its own microcosm. And I think that with a certain amount of time, if you survive the initial indoctrination phase to where you're like, this is for me, you kind of start to realize that you earn respect if you treat people a certain way. The mission higher than self usually takes out some of the bad things that happen with teams. And ultimately, somebody makes a decision, you follow it, you don't question it. And ultimately, as a leader in the military, even if you disagree with that decision, it is your order and expectation to support that decision with the people below you so that they don't even know you disagree with it. So support, and loyalty up and loyalty down is an important part of that. So I think Tesla being mission focused, and Elon is very good at laying some basic ground rules and principles for the companies, and especially the engineering of their products and how to get down to first principles and how to break things and, remove a part and you're not removing enough until you've got to put 10% back in. I think I heard that in one of Everyday Astronaut's podcast recently. I love that one. Obviously that, break it fast and fix it comes out of Silicon Valley. We don't try to break things in the military very often, but I do think that if you hire a veteran, if you get to know them or even become one, you leave that environment a different person than you came in. And ultimately, there's a factor of maturity you can count on at a fairly broad level to where you kind of know what you're going to get. Not exactly, but you kind of know what you're going to get. And, ultimately, loyalty and trusting that they're going to do what you ask and support you in your decision-making goes a long way on team building and esprit de corps in a localized environment. So that's kind of my take on it. But that's from inside the bubble. Somebody may look at me from the outside and, think of the times I spent in the Persian Gulf and would have bad things to think about me because of what I was doing over there and the mission that I was supporting. But I was supporting my country and I was doing what I was told, and I did it every day.
Yeah. How much one of the comments that I heard from one of my former colleagues was that even the leaders that were, so there was obviously, you describe it perfect. I was never in the military, so I've never experienced this, but the way that you described and that was described by them is also as, once a decision is made, the decision is made and you move forward. But there was a lot of feedback sessions and there were a lot of opportunities for everybody to have an equal input into that decision. And then that the best leaders would create an environment where folks were able to all come together from regardless where they're from and share their thoughts in obviously respectful manner, but very open discourse that was removed of ego. Is that a factual statement? From
in
what
a closed
you can
scenario at the right level. So
Okay.
You would never want to introduce that kind of doubt or uncertainty across an entire unit. At the leadership level, bring everybody in, close the door, and say, we're leaving here with a decision, and my decision will be final. But you don't want to I don't know if you watch For All Mankind, but that Apple series now, that one guy that's got he lets everybody in the company have a vote, and ultimately it's a democratic vote on which way the company is going to go. That's not what you want to do if you're going to truly have a hierarchical structure, because everybody has an equal vote. Not to say that can't work, but that's not how the military works. So yes, constructive feedback and soliciting that constructive feedback in a closed environment that does not denigrate the leadership structure, in my opinion, is critical to do. And in my mind, that happened on the vision decision in Elon's shop with Carpathia. There was probably a room. They all got in there. And ultimately, at the end of the day, Elon made a call. And maybe that was supported by some, but not by everybody. But I imagine that he solicited that advice on that decision. But that probably was an executive decision.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I appreciate you sharing those thoughts. Yeah, it was always so the mission driven aspect of the company again was so, it resonated with me so much, and it was so eye opening. We've had so many different discussions on this channel about that specific thing. We've had panels discussing just how many companies can exist that would have that sort of mission driven sort of goal. We role played a pet store. It's like, okay, can we make a pet store have a mission driven goal? And we came up with certain things. But I just always found it so interesting when just how many veterans work at Tesla and how many of them are so successful. I had a boss that was ex-military. I had another boss that's still there who's doing a phenomenally good job. I believe was in the Marines, if I remember correctly. One of the women that I work with, she was in the Army, and there was just so many different folks. And I'm like, man, you guys, they just took all the crazy things that would come up in Tesla. They're like, we'll figure it out. Okay, yeah, we'll move forward. Like just this laser focus towards we have to get there. I'm like, man, I learned a lot today. So it was always very eye opening. I
think Pro Justice kind of talked about this, that it's operating on the verge of chaos and not chaos, and military inherently deals with chaos, right? And how to make good decisions in the midst of chaos. And if you're not comfortable with that, I think being in the military is a process of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? In uncomfortable situations, because that's what reality is. And Tesla keeps pushing the company itself towards if you're not at chaos, you're not moving fast enough. And that does definitely, I feel like, speak really close to that same point.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's a great point too. Yeah. Yeah.
Very good point.
And one of the things in the military, sometimes your mission is coming from several layers higher than you. You're not even part of the discussion, Congress, presidential, and ultimately they come down, and it's like, I can think of some times where, we thought we were deploying in 6 months, yet next thing you know, we're leaving next week. And you're like, oh, wow, and that jump to and do what you're told, it's just part of it. And you know what you're signing up for when you do that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like my closest analogy to that, again, I'm not trying to like draw analogies between military and Tesla. That's one is clearly way more important and dangerous than the other. Okay, like, but one of the things I could draw from there is like, we would have 20 trailers show up because we worked in a warehouse environment and we're just, we were service distribution. 20 trailers show up and your warehouse is full, and then you're like, what the hell is that? And then people are like, no, you just have to figure out how to fit it in there. Like, okay, I guess we have to figure out how to fit it in there. And then just stuff like that would happen all the freaking time. Just situation arises, and then you have to figure out how to deal with it. But it's not just like, I gotta rejigger 1 hour of my work. No, it's like you have to redesign the freaking warehouse to be able to take in 20 truckloads. It's like, it's wild stuff. But anyway, a lot of diamonds are born in the fire, I guess. There maybe their last topic for the live stream before we leave, the breaking news that we had a couple hours ago. I'm curious to hear everyone's opinions. Herbert Diess leaving Volkswagen. Does anybody know if he was fired, or did he leave on his own? Anybody know? I'm gonna look it up while we have a thing. But any immediate reactions to that?
Where to go? That's what I want to know. He and Elon have had a pretty good relationship. Boy, that would be an interesting twist if he's coming to Tesla. If that's not the situation, obviously, he has been the one guy Elon has talked highly of on leadership and leading a company out of a tough spot. So, I think that goes a long way to saying perhaps the road he was on. Don't know.
So here's
I can't help but think about the innovator's dilemma in it, that basically it's impossible to transform a company like Volkswagen to a new technology platform from within, that the only companies that successfully make that transitions do it by spinning off an independent small company that grows alongside the new technology. And it seems like, regardless of how good Herbert Diess is at wanting to transform Volkswagen into an EV company structurally, I don't know that that's even a possible thing. And then if Volkswagen can't do it, what does that tell you about Ford and GM and Stellantis and Toyota?
Yeah.
It does seem like, go ahead, Mike.
Diess was their biggest pusher for the EV future of Volkswagen, and so to see him go is kind of sad.
What's interesting is that they made the Porsche head of the company now, and Porsche is a niche. I love Porsches, FYI. I love Porsches, but it's a niche automaker. There's not really a volume production type of brand, and it's curious to see that they've taken a niche automaker expert and put it at the head of one of the largest automakers in the world. And if you put that within the context of mass scaling EVs and their strategy, how does that line up with the new CEO's base of experience, right? So that's kind of where my brain goes to as I read this. And if anybody has any thoughts or comments on the comment section, do drop them down. We'll use the last few minutes here to kind of dissect this. And I'll probably create I'm going to go freaking 3 hours today. Screw it. I'm going to create a new instance here in a few minutes, and then I'll make a Diess live stream, and then we can share a bunch of thoughts there. My legs. I should have never gotten a standing desk because my ass is on fire, dude. My glutes, man. I got a workout.
That's great.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I do wonder. I do wonder if he does join Tesla.
Elon has said publicly he hates doing that part of the job, right? Wow, it would be amazing if he came over to help step into that part, and Elon went to be chief engineer or something, or president. A lot of things there, and that may not be what's happening here, but Elon has publicly said, he said it on Silicon Valley not too long ago, that he hates that part of the job.
September 1st will be his last day, according to this. Yeah. And do we have any comments from Elon about this yet? Or no? Has he said anything? Wonder. Oops. Hey, spell Elon. Let me go. Because if he makes a comment on it, I wonder. No, he's just shitposting as usual. Okay. There he goes. Doing his thing. Okay. Yeah, we'll create a new instance for the Diess discussion. But Chuck, any parting thoughts? This was such a great discussion. My God, like the amount of knowledge I've gained, it has been awesome, and really we could have talked for another 2 hours specifically around full self-driving and all the intricacies. But do you have any other any parting thoughts or anything you'd like to say before we wrap this sucker up?
Well, other than I love this format, I love the conversation. Long form format, and I think that's about Lex. I think that's about everyone else that's doing these long form podcasts. You really get to know the subject matter of the people and learn a little bit about them. And social media can be very destructive. It can be very mean. It can be very polarizing. And I thank you guys for this format and let me talk rather than just be read in 140 characters or even on my own little 10 to 15 minute YouTube videos. That's not how you get to know somebody and where they're from and what they think and what they're about. And I think it's a great conversation. This is a great engineering discussion. I'm a Tesla bull. I'm a Tesla shareholder. I'm all in. I just I love to think about problems and work on them, and that's kind of what you're witnessing on my channel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to plug your channel, your social, one last time? Make sure everybody knows where to find you.
So just Google Chuck Cook on YouTube. I think it's easy to find that way. I pop up most times. And on Twitter, I'm at Chazman. And I think in the description of this video, Farzad, you put some of my contact information. I got a bio link in there and stuff like that with my LinkedIn and stuff like that for just people that are interested in where I came from and what I do, stuff like that. But yeah, the YouTube thing is just a side gig to put it out there. It's not I love subscribers because it spreads the audience, but if everybody quits watching me next week when they saw the turn, then I guess I'll find something else to do.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, once 1013 drops, you're going to be the most popular YouTube channel on the internet.
I don't know. I'm a long ways from that. I've looked around at some of these subscriber counts. There's a lot of them out there, but I'm not there.
But if you
Rodman
guys,
Hans are good.
I was just going to say, if you guys are more interested in Chuck's turn, he did a video just about the turn, and it's really good. And you can see right from his perspective, if you're just standing there, how scary that turn is. You're a brave man. But thank you.
It's a microcosm of America.
But thank you for your service and everything you're doing for FSD. It's really great to see.
Thanks.
Yeah, the level of technical sophistication that you bring to the way that you're doing the testing definitely is a huge, it's a win for the Tesla community and a win for Tesla too. So we really appreciate that.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everybody. We'll see you in 15 minutes here. But thank you, Chuck, once again, man. Really appreciate you coming on. Great honor. Yeah. And can't wait for that 1013 video, bro. I can't wait.
Let's go.
Can't wait to see it. All right, everybody. We're signing off here and
everyone.
broadcast.